This video is about extending probation. And probation extensions in North Carolina can be a little bit tricky. There's multiple statutes involved and it can get kind of technical. But it's an important thing to make sure you know how to get it right or to recognize when it's been done incorrectly. And so that's what we'll cover today. Some of the confusion about probation extensions comes from the fact that there are two different types of extensions in North Carolina. The first are what I call ordinary extensions, and then the others are what I call special purpose extensions. And those those terms don't appear in the general statutes, but they're just something I use to distinguish between the two types. So there's different rules applicable to each of them. Let's talk about them one by one, and we'll start with the ordinary extensions. Ordinary extensions are described in General Statute 15A, 1344D. Let's go ahead and bring that statute in there. And what you see is that this law allows for an extension of the probation up to the maximum allowed under General Statute 15A 1342A. And if you look at that statute, what you see is that the maximum period of probation under that can't exceed 5 years. And looking back at 1344D, what you can see is that this type of extension can be done at any time prior to expiration or termination of probation, so there's no limitation as to time, and the court can do it after notice and hearing for good cause shown. So there doesn't need to have been an allegation or finding of violation before the court can extend probation under this provision. So let's work through an example to see how this looks. Let's say you had somebody sentenced initially to probation of 24 months. We'll put this out on a timeline. Through an ordinary extension of probation, the court could, at any time during that first 24 months, extend the probation by up to 36 months. That'd be a 36-month extension, in this case out to the maximum of 60 months, the 5-year maximum period of probation, at any time for good cause shown. Of course, that 36-month extension would have been the longest the court could do. This statute does allow for shorter extensions. The court could have initially thought, well, you only need an additional, say 6 months on probation. A 6-month extension would have taken the person to 30. Then if that turned out not to be enough, the court could add another 6 out to 36. If that wasn't enough, then the court could have added, let's say 12 out to 48, and then that final 12 to 60. But in no case could the court, through ordinary extensions, extend beyond that 60-month maximum term of probation. And in terms of how that gets reflected on the modification order that extends the defendant's probation, we see here the relevant snippet from the Form 609, the modification order, and here the defendant's term of probation is extended for a period of, let's go back to our 36-month extension, 36 months. And we would note that this was done for good cause shown pursuant to 15A 1344D, so our ordinary extension. And you can see that the note here reminds us that the total of that type of extension under 15A 1344D cannot exceed 5 years. So let's shift gears and talk about special purpose extensions. These are described in a different set of statutes in 15A 1342, and then they're also mentioned in 15A 1343.2. So here's the statute. This is 15A 1342A, and what you can see is that this one allows for an extension not to exceed 3 years beyond the original period of probation, but there's some strings attached. Number one, it can only be done with the consent of the defendant. Number two, it can only be done in the last 6 months of the original period of probation. And number three, it can only be done for certain purposes. And those permitted purposes are completion of a program of restitution or to continue medical or psychiatric treatment. So 3 requirements. Number 1, you have to have the defendant's consent. Number 2, it has to be for one of these identified purposes. And number 3, there are timing requirements in that it has to be done within the last 6 months of the original period of probation. So let's work through an example to see how that plays out. You have a defendant initially placed on probation, let's say for 36 months. Through the special purpose extension statute, the court could extend this probation by up to 3 years. And that would take it all the way out to 72 months if you had the defendant's consent, if it was for restitution or for treatment, and if the extension were not done until the last 6 months of the period of probation, the original period of probation, which in this case, what that would mean, the original period of probation is 36 months. So you'd have this window from 30 to 36 where this extension could be done to satisfy the timing requirement. If the court had tried to do the extension any later than that, then obviously it would have been too late because the period of probation would have expired. But a tricky thing is that it would be wrong for the court to try to do a special purpose extension any earlier than that. If you acted, say in month 24, it became obvious that the person wasn't going to be able to pay all their restitution, you still have to wait until you get inside the 30 to 36 month window, in this case, the last 6 months of that original period of probation, which here was 36, to do the special purpose extension. And the special purpose extension really is the one way you can get past that 60-month brick wall that exists for the purpose of ordinary extensions. There's no way to get past that through ordinary. But on the other hand, I would say that if you've got a period of probation that you don't need to be any longer than 60 months, there's really no reason to use the special purpose extension. It has, more technical requirements to it, more timing requirements, and so if you don't need to go past 60, you might as well just use an ordinary extension or series of ordinary extensions to get there. And as far as how that would get recorded on the judgment form, on the modification order, you can see again, the defendant's term of probation is extended for a period of, let's say, 36 months from our example. And this time, though, we would check B with the defendant's consent pursuant to the special purpose extension statutes. And you can see the note, explanatory note here shows that this must be for restitution or treatment. And it also notes that it can only be ordered during the last 6 months of the original unextended period of probation and can't extend 3 years beyond that original period. This reference to unextended period of probation is helpful because it really highlights that if a person who had a 36-month term of probation initially had already received either a special purpose extension or, let's say, an ordinary extension out to 48 months, it would be too late to do a special purpose extension at that point because they're no longer in the last 6 months of their original period of probation, which in this case was 36 months. So once somebody has extended once, it probably is going to be the case that they're no longer eligible for a special purpose extension. Another illustration of a similar point is the answer to the question of how long any probationer can be on probation in a single case. If you ask that, people will sometimes say 8 years. And that's true, but only if you do a special purpose extension for a probationer whose original period of probation is 60 months, is 5 years. Otherwise, you won't have enough time to get all the way from that 5 years out to 8. We'll give ourselves a little bit more room here. You could only get to that 8-year point if the original period of probation was 60 months. At some point in the last 6 months of that original period of probation, so somewhere between month 54 and 60 would be the eligibility window for this, the court extended probation by 3 years from that original 60-month period, and that would indeed take you all the way out to an 8-year period of probation. But it's only if you do it just right, and again, of course, with the defendant's consent, that you can get to that 8-year point. So I hope that's a helpful explanation of the two different types of probation extensions. As always, please contact me if you have any questions. Thanks.